Hello, my name is Peter Howard. Thanks for checking out my video. If you're here, it's probably because you have gotten a hold of my missing targets data history since 2008, which I posted on Patreon today. I was going to show a little bit about how I used it when looking over for examples to use on my episode of the Dynasty Crossroads, where I talked about how missing targets are easily misunderstood for the non-degenerates who don't dig through the data all by themselves, and I think there's some common misconceptions about what missing targets can mean for the players left on the depth chart when a player leaves or gets injured, and this is one way of digging through it. So what I've got here is a list of all player stats at all positions: quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver, the year in which they played to accrue those stats, their name, their quarterback for that year based on who finished higher in position ranking. So I know sometimes teams have two quarterbacks or three or four playing a single year, but whoever finished the highest in their overall position ranking is the one listed as the QB1. The team they played for that year, the team they played for next year, and if they were injured or didn't play that next year, then it just lists them as NA, because they weren't available, they weren't in the league, they retired for whatever reason, they were no longer available, then it will just list them as NA. And then I've got a column to identify whether each line, each season's data here, is in fact from the season before they left the team or not, and I'll show you how that's useful in a minute. This is how many target difference, the target difference between what they played in their in the year N, so the first year. So in this case, Brandon Marshall got 182 targets. The next year he got 12 more targets, and so you see the number 12 and the target change from year N to N+1. Whereas over here, Andre Johnson got actually an increase of 84 targets from 2008 to 2009. And down here you see Tyrell Owens got one less target in 2009 than he did 2008. So again, it probably makes a lot of sense, but I just wanted to talk it through anyway. You see the number of games they played in this season, the season that's listed in their row. So in 2008, Brandon Marshall played 15 games. That would be helpful. Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, position, year, team name, their QB1 is in this column. The team they played for, the team they played for next year is in this one. Then you've got whether they're available or not to that team in the next year, indicated by a 1 or 0 in this column. And the number of target difference between this year, the one listed in their row, and the very next year, so 2008 to 2009, for example. As I was just saying, Brandon Marshall got 12 more targets next year than he did in this 2008 year. And you can also see the targets they got the year before, and I'll show why I've done it that way, because technically this shows you from the year before the one that's actually listed. But again, I'll show you why I put it that way, just so it's easy to look for individual examples instead of exploring R-squared or any complicated metric. You can literally see it example by example. In this column you've got their ADOT, but I don't have ADOT data until 2009, and so in 2008, for example, and I just wanted to give a 10-year history, that's why I went to 2008, but so all 2008 stats will just read NA. There are a few seasons where players just don't have ADOTs listed by AOTS.com. So if we skim down here, most of these should be 2008. But if we go to the end, you'll see, yeah, there's some 2017 players. They just didn't get AOTS data collected, so I don't have it. Then you've got the targets per game that they had in that individual year, and on the end here you've got my new attempt at a different stat, but it's a work in progress here. It's targets they got above expected based on their ADOT, both by the QB's history in the orange column and league average by the blue column. Then you've got their points per game, so just how well they did that year, just a good estimation of how well they were playing that year, and then their overall position rank. So that's all the data. How did I use it? Well, the way I was using it on the Crossroads, I specifically was looking at wide receiver, so I filtered to wide receiver. And then I look for, and this is currently sorted by targets, so if I look for the first number 1, I see Tyrell Owens is the highest target earner who changed teams the next year. So in 2009, Tyrell Owens was on a different team, and he was in Dallas in 2008. So the way I was doing it was just to go to Dallas, and specifically in 2008. And you see here he is, and he's going to leave the team next year. But in this particular year, he earned 140 targets, right? And the year before that, he earned 141, essentially. So if we skip over to 2009 now and keep it filtered to Dallas, we see what Dallas did now that Tyrell Owens was gone. And that's why I kept the N-1 targets in here, so you could see the difference that they did now Tyrell Owens is gone. You see that Miles Austin here, he earned 124 targets last year in 2009, which is 23 more than he did last year. Roy Williams here, he got 82 targets, which was 4 more than the year before when Tyrell Owens was on the team. Patrick Creighton, he got 67 targets, so he got 3 less targets than the year before when Owens was on the team. And so ultimately what you can see, and this was just a random example, I didn't expect this to be exactly as perfect as all the examples I use in the show, but it is. And you see that they increased by a total of 102 targets. But if we skip back to 2008, we see that Tyrell Owens took with him 140 targets, and that goes into kind of, targets created over expectation. There's at least 30 targets there that just left. And once you look at enough examples, I think you'll come to the same conclusion I do, that these 100 targets had much more to do with what these players could do with the space. Miles Austin could get to 100 targets because of what he can do. It was because Tyrell Owens left, but it's not because there were Tyrell Owens targets left laying around on the floor. It's because there was space for someone to earn what they could earn, and Miles Austin's height that year in that situation was 101. So it's not Tyrell Owens leaving mattered, but not so Miles Austin could pick up Tyrell Owens' targets. Instead, it was about the targets that he created. And again, just to reiterate my rant from the podcast, I think that's the best way to read the situations when players leave. It's that there might be a vacuum. What can these players do with it? Not, Tyrell Owens took 140 targets, therefore there are 140 targets laying around to pick up. I don't think that's the best way of trying to read the situations. And I think it's a natural assumption when we hear very smart people talking about missed targets, and me, I'm just a muggins who makes things that I think are natural assumptions. And it wasn't until I dug into it I really understood what they were trying to tell me, which wasn't that 140 targets was laying around. In fact, it just meant that we could see what these players were capable of doing in this situation, which turned out to be obviously a lot less than Tyrell Owens because he was really good. So another example, if we go to 2009, just to show it one more time. Again, just the way I use this data table. You can use it however you want, obviously. But if we skip over 2009, I see the highest target earner was Brandon Marshall. He left the team in 2010, but he was on Denver in 2009. So if we filter by Denver in 2009, we see that Brandon Marshall earned 154 targets in 2009 with Kyle Orton as his QB1, right? But he's going to leave and go to Miami in 2010. So sticking with Denver and filtering over to 2010, we get to see what players did once Brandon Marshall had left. And again, you can see the target changes over here, the difference. Targets N-1. I should have written that better. What should I put that? Targets from N-1, which is, I don't know if that sounds better, but that's exactly what it is. So again, in 2010, Brandon Lloyd earned 153 targets. That was only 18 more than he got from the year before, once Brandon Marshall had left. So again, there were targets available. Brandon Lloyd did fill into the space, but to the tune of 18 targets. He didn't blow up over 200. He did really well because Brandon Lloyd was actually a pretty good receiver in his own right, but he didn't balloon up. And you could compare it as, a simple comparison of what he did if you looked at points per game or his overall position rank. And again, if we skip back over Brandon Lloyd over here was getting 9.9 points per game, position rank 125. He didn't earn a lot of targets that year, but I'd have to dig into Brandon Lloyd a little more to figure out where he was in his career, right here. But he only played 2 games. So again, just the way I think through these situations, I think the reason Brandon Lloyd came back up and got 153 targets the next year isn't because, and that's, sorry, this column, 135 extra targets, wasn't because Brandon Marshall had left. It was because when Brandon Lloyd was healthy, this was what he was capable of doing. Again, because he didn't perfectly fill out Brandon Marshall's target share, he just created his own. But again, this is a slightly less easy example than the ones I use on the podcast, the one I happen to use to start. There are ones that lead you to think the other way. But again, I think if you look at enough examples and explore enough examples of when players left, you definitely get the impression that targets just leave, and it's up to the players to earn their own targets without that player on the depth field. Does it matter? Certainly. But you have to do. It's not that their left targets on the ground just get distributed out. I think, especially to a muggins like me, that more misrepresents what's likely to happen than it does help explain what's likely to happen, say in Pittsburgh in 2019 with Antonio Brown being gone. Anyway, so that's the data. I've uploaded the link on the Patreon site so you can go look at it, download it, make a copy, and explore it for yourself. If you have any more questions about it, obviously you can hit me up on Twitter at PAHowdy. You can contact me on Patreon or leave a comment on this video. So thanks very much, and good luck with your missing target data exploration, I guess. Thanks very much.